Are you also, are we live? I'd like to welcome everybody here. This is House and Senate Transportation Committee members, and we're here to hear it's Municipal Advocacy Day, and we're here to hear the league. I think that the first thing we do is we might start, each of you introduce yourself around the table.
Good morning, I am Chris Kieser. I am representative from Rutland South.
Morning, I'm Patty McCoy. I represent Rutland One, which is Pulteney, Iros, and part of Wells, and former town clerk and treasurer.
I'm Molly Burke, and I represent the third Brattleboro.
Morning, Phil Pouch, represent Heinsberg.
Hello, I'm Chloe Tomlinson and I represent Winooski.
I'm Kate Lally and I represent Shelburne.
Tim Corkin, I represent Bennington District 2.
And I'm Rich Westman, and I chair the Senate Transportation Committee, and I represent the Lamoille District.
And I'm Rebecca White, and I represent the Windsor County District, and I'm the vice chair of this committee.
And I'm Pat Brennan, I represent Grand Isle County and Colchester.
I'm Senator Andrew Persick, represent the Washington District, which is Washington County, Orange, Braintree, and Stowe.
I'm Representative Candace White. I live in Waitsfield and represent Washington County too.
Jim Casey, Addison, Rutland 1.
Ken Wells, Lawrence County 3.
And chair of the House Transportation Committee is just walking around the table, and he's from Swanton.
Just helping the litter picker ups on 89. 44,000 tons in the next week.
And since you're late,
Excellent.
we're gonna get started, and you can give your hats out later. Ted, you're first.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
See you. I'm Ted Brady. I'm the executive director of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And I want to start by thanking you for having this hearing today. As you all know, this is probably the #1 topic that every municipality spends most of their time talking about. And as transportation experts, you all know the familiar 80-20 funding formula that generally is how the feds spread their money around, right? 80% federal, 20% state and local. But at VLCT, we use a different, similar 80-20 formula, which is in Vermont, as you know, I think our members know, 83% of Vermont's roads are operated, owned, maintained, constructed by local government, and 17% by state government. We've all heard that stat before, but it's really astounding. We're talking about 15,671 miles in a network. Of that, class 1, class 2, and class 3, and class 4 roads and state highways, only 2,872 are maintained solely or in part by state governments. That's just always a good place to ground us today. You all know that. I need to say it again. You also know that local government, our budgets, the things that you all vote on at town meeting day, are more than 50% transportation dollars, right? That's most of the budget. I estimate that Vermont communities are spending more than $500 million in local property tax dollars that they're raising on their own at their town meetings on transportation budgets. It's probably at this point, last time I did it was 4 years ago, where I did the math. It's probably at this point approaching $750 million. Going back to that 80-20 rule, 83-70 rule, I just compare that $500 million to the amount of money that the state is able to contribute to local roads. About $100 million in state and federal dollars that you folks allocate to local transportation. Of what, you're approaching $1 billion this year in a transportation budget. So really the exact inverse of that 83-7. About 10% of the state budget is being spent on 83%. I share that statistic not because you're not doing enough, and everybody in this room today who came from their communities knows the Senate and the House Transportation Committees historically been great allies of local transportation. Specifically, I want to thank Chair Walker and the House Transportation Committee for trying to find last year for pegging the local programs to the number they were at last year and trying to hold that number. I want to thank him again and the committee for the work they did to try to be creative this year. Josh Hanford reminds me, our theory on local transportation and transportation dollars is every single options on the table to solve this problem. So thank you for thinking that. I also need to thank Chair Westman and the Senate Transportation Committee for being really creative and thoughtful this year and trying to find new money for local transportation programs. That doesn't mean the problem's not there. And I think Vermonters need to understand that we are actually in a crisis when it comes to local transportation funding. I like to say, I just had a 16-year-old kid get his license, and this was his birthday gift. I can't fix it well. And I gave him that fix it flat, that, and I think I have my AAA card in there, but I can't find it. I gave him a AAA membership. And you know, it's kind of a kitschy thing to do for your kid when they turn 16. But the reality is, in many of our communities, you'd be foolish not to drive with a can of fix a flat and a AAA card because the roads are in horrible shape. We cannot afford to maintain our roads. And a can of fix a flat and a AAA card is not a sound transportation policy. Until we find a way to increase local highway aid at the state level, we need to allow towns to raise revenue. We need to allow towns all options. And so you've heard Josh and Samantha in your committee talk about this. We need more diverse consumption taxes. We need the ability to raise more taxes at the local level. We need to allow for higher local option taxes at the local level. 1% is not enough, especially when the state's taking 25% of it. We need to, this is the number one thing, and I know you're all in other committees and on the floor talking about this year. We need to solve the property tax crisis in this state because the increasing property tax is consuming all of the taxing authority and taxing capacity that our municipalities have. I'm not just here to complain. You've heard VLCT's policy recommendations before, but I need to say this in front of the members. Every 2 years, we convene our members to try to create a policy that our membership can vote on as a whole. All 247 towns and cities vote on our transportation policy. And this year we brought you about 5 bullet point priorities, asking you, you heard this, to diversify the increased transportation fund revenue sources. I think both committees have done a nice job trying to find them. Direct the full purchase and use tax on motor vehicles to the transportation fund. Both committees have been advocating for this, so really appreciate that. We haven't gotten to the fund one of remitting a portion of registration fees and excess weight permit fees to municipalities where the vehicles are registered. We haven't gotten to the fully funding of town highway aid, town structures, and town bridges programs according to need, but we're working on that with you, and we really appreciate that. We're hoping that we can provide incentives for municipalities to take over state highways that function on main streets. We're hoping that we can allow V-Trans to enter into agreements with municipalities for use of state-owned equipment for small transportation projects. So those are our priorities that we brought to you this week. Don't worry, I'm done. We've got people who actually are in the trenches every day that I hope you can have a conversation with about their needs. But before formally wrapping up, I want to thank you for working with our intergovernmental relations team, Josh Hanford and Samantha Sheen, who have been with you for the whole session, and they're here as, they're not just here to listen to you and try to influence you, they are here to be your allies and to be your sources of information. That policy I mentioned is backed by 10,000 local officials, select board members, the highway supervisors, clerks, listers, go down the list, and all of the employee people that work in our cities and towns. They can't be here every day, and we really rely on Josh and Samantha to represent them. But thank you. I'm sticking around for the day, so if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them at the end. But I think my main job here, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, is to invite our first actual municipal official.
Well, Josh was,
Josh.
on our schedule was next.
Gonna do that, but I'm pretty quick. The record, John Camper, VLCT. As Ted said, we have a lot of members here, so we want them to speak to you. I was simply just gonna reference who we've got and supposed to know which order to go up and give a little flavor for who they are. We have the mayor of Barry joining you next. We have a highway superintendent from Morristown. Then we have a town manager from Bethel. We have a town clerk and treasurer from Panton, a town administrator from Calais, and a select board member from Royalton to join you. And just really appreciate you giving us the time to talk to and to hear what our members, we know you are advocates and understand most of this, but we see our job is to help you advocate these needs across your other committees. We know you don't control all the money or the purse strings or the taxing authorities. So we want to be here to help you with that process, and I'll turn it over to the mayor to kick things off. Thank you.
Don't forget your fix it one.
That's Dan.
That's Dan.
Gonna wrap it up.
I mean, I'll take it.
Morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Lozon. It's my honor to serve as the mayor of Barry City. Thank you for letting me be here. You know, when they said I could use the fix a flat as a problem. And you know that, honestly, that's silly. You know why? I'll see your fix a flat and raise you 4 Pirelli P6 tires. And that's a fact. If you want to fact check me, call DJ Hardiker. Barry, I've had to purchase 4 tires. Run flat, by the way, is a lie. They don't. When you hit a big enough pothole, it blows the sidewall out and they won't run flat.
I think the reason they left it, it's empty.
Chairman Weston, Chairman Walker, members of the committee, thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to speak this morning. You know, I want to start with a bit of optimism and gratitude because I think it helps. This could be worse. It truly could. It could be a lot worse. I know that these committees, I follow your work. You have worked really hard in recent years to advance funding strategies and most importantly, to stop further reductions in the transportation fund. And sincerely, we thank you for that. So in some respects, I know this morning I'm preaching to the choir. There's nothing I'm going to tell you that you don't already know. There's no math I can present to you that you haven't already done. And I understand that. But unfortunately, as you know, even when we look at the good work you've done, when we account for inflation, you know that we've lost ground. We're actually doing less paving, less work today than we were 10 years ago. Unlike so many problems in Vermont and nationwide, our current transportation funding crisis is relatively easy to quantify. It's just math. We know how many miles of roads we have to maintain. We know how many bridges we're responsible for. We know how much each mile of paving costs, although, you know, there are always variables there, such as the current conflict in Iran that we all know is going to drive, predicted to drive paving costs up upwards of 30 to 40%. And lastly, we have a great state lab up in Berlin that can actually predict with relative certainty how quickly our roads will go from good to poor. You've already done the math. I'm sure you have. So you certainly know the cost. But, you know, this funding crisis is a little unique because unlike other funding challenges, this problem grows exponentially. For example, and some may argue with this example, but if we assist 60% of our unhoused Vermonters in finding homes, we'll have roughly 2,000 Vermonters who are unhoused next year. Now, some may want to argue the numbers that, you know, it'll be a little higher, it'll be a little lower, but they can't argue the basic premise that if we house 60% of the currently unhoused Vermonters, the unhoused population will go down. That's not the case, as you all know, with transportation funding. If we fund only 60% of the cost, the problem will grow exponentially next year and exponentially the year after that. Of course, you all know that. So I'll talk a little bit about my favorite subject, Barry, Vermont. Route 14 and Route 302, for those of you who have driven Barry, it occupies much of our city. It's really the main thoroughfares. Our main street is actually Route 302. Route 302, if you live in central Vermont and you use heating oil, chances are the truck that hauled that heating oil went down 302 and went through Barry City. That's kind of the major connector between Portland, between those ports and central Vermont. And these roads, as we all know, are in pretty poor condition. It forces us in Barry, and we're told, and listen, I like everybody. I've been doing this too long. So I take everyone at face value and I like everybody. Poor Secretary Flynn, his office is in Barry now. It's on the first floor. So if I'm downtown walking around, I often am, all I have to do is walk about 20 steps off the sidewalk and I'm at his window and I bang on it. And I say, Joe, I'm coming in. And we have a chat about roads. So I'm pretty sure that Secretary Flynn wishes his office was on the second floor. I just find a ladder for the record. in case he's wondering. But I get more complaints truly about potholes and the condition of the roads in Barry City than I do any other issue. Than public safety, than water main breaks, than loose dogs running around. You know, when you're a small town mayor, you're where all the complaints seem to find themselves. But I get more complaints about roads, and some of them honestly break your heart. When it makes you want to break out your own wallet. When a single mom writes to you and says, you know, I'm raising 3 kids, I'm struggling, and I blew out a tire on a pothole, and that's $200, and now I've got some choices to make. And that's happening more and more frequently, unfortunately. So we have the same problem in Barry City that we have on a statewide basis. Obviously different numbers. Barry is only a city that's 4 square miles, 8,400 residents, but we had much the same problem. So I can show you that problem graphically, and I apologize, I didn't bring extra copies, but it's going to look very familiar. So this is just a graph that runs from 2017 to 2030. The big yellow bars are our funding deficit. In other words, our inability to keep up with the cost of paving. So back here, where you see the blue line is where we need to be, and the red line is where we've been. And starting in 2017, I was actually mayor back then. I served from 2006 to 2018, then stepped away from a bit, and for a bit, and then when the city flooded, I stepped up. And but this, where you see that line dip a little bit, that was my poor decision. That was my final year in office after 12 years of service, and we were looking at a fairly significant property tax increase. And so there were some members of the council who said, hey, Tom, if we just reduce the transportation budget, we can hit our target in terms of our property tax increase. And I made a mistake. I made a bad choice, and I agree. Because selfishly, I didn't want my legacy to be, I was the guy who, when he left office, raised tax. And I remembered that mistake. When I make a mistake, I remember it. And so in the years that followed, 2 mayors followed me, and I kept waiting. Like, when is someone going to call me stupid? Because I was. When are they going to call me out? And they never did. They did the same thing. They kept underfunding our transportation budget because no one wants to be that guy. And so when I returned to office 2 years ago in 24, I remembered that mistake. And interestingly, just last Tuesday, I presented a 5-year plan to the city council. We're actually 2 years into it. I started doing it quietly 2 years ago when I said, we're going to increase at the very last meeting as we were setting the warning for the city meeting, town meeting. I said to them, we're going to increase our transportation budget by 33%. I put them right on the spot. So who was going to say no? Everybody wanted to get reelected. So they went along with it, and we increased our transportation, our paving budget by 33%. This year I did the same thing, smaller percentage, only 25%, still a big double-digit increase. And thankfully they supported it. They recognized the need. They could see the yellow bars as well as I could. We weren't keeping up. You know, we should be at roughly, and again, these numbers pale in comparison to what you're dealing with. We should have been at around 1.1 million. You know, we were at 600,000. We were half. So like the state of Vermont, we were losing ground every year. You know, if you don't fix 50 potholes this year, well, now you have 100 the year after that, 150 the year after that. And we kept making the same mistake for 6 years. So thankfully, they went along with me. And then at the following meeting, I presented them with a plan. And keep in mind, as we're making these choices, as we're increasing our paving budget by 33 and then 25%, we're making hard choices. You know, I would have liked to, you know, literacy, especially children literacy, it just means everything to me. You know, I believe in it. I believe that when you teach a child to read, you open the world to them. But I had to make tough choices. Not everyone in Berry City uses the library. I have to recognize that. Not everyone in Berry City uses our parks. I have to recognize that. But virtually everyone in Berry City uses our roads. And they're not asking for a lot. They're simply asking for safe, smooth roads. And that simply wasn't the case. So as I explained to the council, we can get there. So this little line, the red line, the vertical line is just showing you kind of when I started. And this little thing that you can't read, I'm sorry, right here is we are here. This is where we are today. So we're in the second year of what I presented to the council as a 3-year plan. And I said, look, we're going to have to make hard choices. There are things we're not going to be able, we're going to have to get used to saying no. We're going to have to prioritize. But to me, that's what governing has always been about. We'll always have more problems than we have resources, always. So you have to learn how to prioritize and how to govern. And as I explained to the council, we of course, we govern for the 2,000 people who use the library. I value it. I'll continue to contribute. But we have to govern first and foremost for the 8,400 people who live here, and they have to be our priority. And so that's the choice, thankfully, that's the choice that we've made in Berry. And as I look at this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, thank you for the good work that you've done. You know, I should probably be sitting in front of the entire General Assembly. We have to make hard choices, and these aren't easy choices. But like Berry City, when you look at the state of Vermont, not everyone uses our parks. We value them. Not everyone hunts, not everyone fishes, not everyone takes advantage of all of the amenities we have in Vermont, but everybody uses roads. And my choice now is, you know, the one thing that I haven't quantified in this calculation is the fact that we're now expected to accept responsibility for roads, for maintaining roads, when it's not our responsibility to repave them. It is our responsibility to maintain them. I accept that. We have money in the budget for that. But now more and more, we're being asked to actually repave sections of state highways. And my biggest concern, I'll be very frank with you, you know, I've been doing this a while. And every time I accept responsibility, a responsibility that should be a state responsibility, I am stuck with it forever. It just always happens that way. So, you know, I'm sitting here having to say to constituents, having to explain that to them. I'm sorry your run flat doesn't run flat. I'm sorry you blew your tire out. You know, I'm sorry you have to short your grocery budget by $200 because we couldn't accept our responsibility. But those are the choices that we're going to have to make. So, you know, as I leave, it's what I did in Berry City. I guess my message to you, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, you can quantify this problem. It may take us 5 or 6 years to work our way out of it. But what I see going on, and I see you fighting so hard for everything that you get, but what I see going on is we're not fixing the problem. We're not presenting Vermonters with a plan to actually fix the problem. We're mitigating a lot. We're trying to prevent ourselves from going too far backwards year after year. But I've never seen a plan to actually fix the problem, whether it's a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 7-year plan, or I'd take a 10-year plan at this point. And so that really is my message to the committee too. First of all, thank you for your good work. You give up a lot to be here, I know that. And so I thank you for that. And then lastly, I hope we can effect a plan that actually fixes the problem. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, did you want to ask me any questions? I apologize.
Are you up for hire to come with Matt and I and travel around?
You let me know. You let me know. By profession, I'm a tax accountant, senior partner at an accounting firm.
You're aware of that.
In my rearview mirror. I am campaigning right now and I'm having a lot of fun doing that. But if you need a wingman, you call me
We might take you up on that.
anytime. I'm sorry, any other? No, we're good. Thank you very much.
Jordan. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for taking the time to see us today. My name is George St. Anne, and I'm the Highway Superintendent and Road Commissioner for the town of Morristown. Morristown has the highest town highway mileage in Lamoille County at 92.13 miles, and we also have 9 miles of town maintained sidewalk and 17 town maintained structures. For the upcoming fiscal year, Morristown has passed a total municipal budget of approximately $10.4 million, and a significant 30% of that, roughly $3.1 million, is dedicated solely to highway maintenance. While we are grateful for the $240,000 we have budgeted for state aid to highways, it is important to note that this offsets less than 8% of our highway maintenance costs. Furthermore, these figures cover routine upkeep, only routine upkeep. To address the mounting need for capital improvements, our voters recently took the proactive step of approving a separate $233,500 article specifically for our bridge and infrastructure fund and adopting local options taxes. The math of road maintenance is simple but punishing. The longer we wait, the more it costs. And paving a road while it's in good to fair condition is the only fiscally responsible strategy. As the condition of a road deteriorates, the amount of asphalt required to repair it increases and the cost grows exponentially. I'm sure you all know this, but we'll work through it. Paving roads when they're in good to fair condition is the most cost-effective strategy, and it can be done with a simple overlay and costs our town around $50,000 per mile. If a road falls to poor condition, it requires more costly pavement treatment, like a shim and overlay, and costs roughly $132,000 per mile. This is 164% more expensive than paving the road when it is in good to fair condition. If the road falls into very poor condition, it requires even more costly pavement treatment, and we will generally follow a reclaim and pave up to 4 inches of asphalt. And the cost of that is around $287,000 per mile. That is 424% more expensive than paving the road when it's in good to fair condition. In 2024, Morristown contracted Greenman Pedersen Inc. to conduct a pavement condition analysis for our town. And they stated that the strategy of fixing roads in poor condition instead of preserving good roads is known as the worst first approach and generally regarded as the least cost-effective strategy. The common analogy is changing the oil in your car is more cost-effective than waiting for the engine to seize and replacing the engine. When we lack the funds as a town to preserve good roads, we're forced into a worst first approach, which is the least cost-effective way to spend our taxpayers' dollars. Since the GPI pavement condition assessment was done in 2024, we have paved 3.8 miles of town highway, but 15.6 of our 36.8 miles of paved town highway is still in poor to very poor condition. That is 42.4% of our paved town highway network and represents a $3.2 million backlog in paving. To catch up on paving, we have implemented a 5-year plan, and that involves $800,000 in paving each year. This special project would represent a 6.6% increase to our town budget, on top of the 6.8% increase to our general budget due to inflationary pressures, totaling a 13.4% property tax increase if we funded this project strictly on property tax increases. This does not account for the deterioration of our roads that are currently in good or fair condition. As a result, the voters in Morristown passed local options tax this year. Our only funding source outside property taxes and LOT is the Town Highway Class 2 roadway program. And the maximum grant award for that is $200,000, which is around 25% of our annual paving needs. Less than half of Morristown's paved roads are Class 2, meaning 58% of our paved roads are not eligible for this grant program and rely solely on property tax increases and LOT for paving. Of our 9 miles of sidewalk, or 47,000 feet, 6,000 feet is in very poor condition, representing a $600,000 backlog. Part of our 5-year plan is to replace 1,500 feet of sidewalk per year at a cost of roughly $150,000 per year. If not for LOT, this would represent a 1.7% increase in our town budget, and when done in conjunction with paving, equals an 8.3% increase. And then on top of the 6.8 increase on our general budget due to inflation, that would represent a 15.1% increase in property taxes to achieve this 5-year plan. Most of Morristown's 17 structures are noted in the V-Trans Bridge report as needing repairs, including several that need significant work, including repair or replacement of bridge decks and abutments. And our only funding source for bridge repair outside property tax increases and LOT is the Town Highway Structure Program with a max award amount of $200,000. We recently held a competitive bid process to paint one of our bridges in town, and the low bid on that project was $286,000 just to paint it. In summary, the current state funding levels fall short of municipalities' needs. The V-Trans Town Highway Aid Program offsets just 7.7% of our maintenance budget. The funding for special projects like paving, sidewalk replacement, and bridge repairs rely solely on grant funding, property tax increases, and LOT. Grant funding for paving meets 25% of Morristown's annual needs, and that's if we are awarded the Class 2 roadways grant every year. The current Class 2 roadway program guidelines exclude the majority of Morristown's paved town highways. Grant funding for sidewalks falls short of Morristown's annual needs at 50%. And again, this is if we are awarded. That would be through the V-Trans Small Scale Bike Ped Grant. That is an incredibly valuable program for us, and we love it. We'd like to have it on a yearly basis. Grant funding for bridge repairs falls short of needs based on project cost versus award maximum. And the cost just for painting a bridge exceeds the maximum potential grant offered through the Town Highway Structure Program. That's all I got.
Hi, as usual, you've done a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like, you can submit your testimony so we can have that online for, you can give that to one of the assistants. That'd be great. So put that online.
I'm Therese Kirby. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Therese.
So I'm the town manager for the, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear my testimony today. Bethel has 88 miles of road, of which we maintain approximately 68 miles. 11 of those are paved and 57 miles are gravel. We maintain this with 1 full-time road foreman and 2 full-time road crew members. We hire seasonal employees for plowing, as we've been unable to fill another full-time position for the last several years. As town manager, in a small town, I'm also the road commissioner, the zoning administrator, so you have a lot of titles in a small town. So I'm also road commissioner, so oversee work, bids, etc. So I'm going to quote kind of what Ted was saying, that Vermont has approximately 14,000 miles of road, with only about 17 to 20% managed by state highways, 80% are managed by towns. That leaves small towns like Bethel to bear the financial burden of maintaining not only roads, but bridges and culverts. And with 10.4% of Bethel's population living below the poverty level, that makes infrastructure dollars even harder to come by. Maintaining infrastructure is not just about the increased cost of materials, fuel, and manpower, which I think Jordan did a great job covering. It's about the cost of equipment. Something to think about since COVID is the cost of yellow steel. So in 2021, the town of Bethel purchased a new Western Star plow truck for $198,095. In 2023, we purchased another one for $259,020. And I just signed the order to purchase another one at $329,798. That's a 66.48% increase in just 5 years. We're talking similar truck here. So my example for today is a road that most of you probably know is Camp Brook Road. It connects Bethel to Rochester and is used as a main commuter route for people working in Randolph, White River, etc. Also regularly used by the ambulance. Camp Brook is a Class 2 town highway in Bethel, of which of the portion of that we maintain 6.11 miles, while it maintains the other side. It's also a federal highway which really only does you any good if it floods. So Bethel receives $57,147 in class 2 highway aid, or $47.86 per mile. So for Camp Brook, that equates to $28,716 a year, so less than 30 grand a year. From July of 25 to April 15th, I have the breakdown, but I've already given you my. So we spent $66,000 already over that. We currently have a paving project out to bid. And because we did not receive a paving grant, we're in a 6 to 7 year rotation until we can even get one. We are spending $355,000 to $400,000 out of our capital road fund, hoping to get just 0.9 miles paved. But due to the increase in the paving costs, obviously we've delayed the bid a little bit because of the cost of fuel. So we're waiting. We're also doing an asphalt adjustment. So, but this one project to get less than a mile paved is going to take half, 48% to 50% of what we even have in our capital road fund to do this project. I did review the document from January 9th, 2026. It was created by Logan Blueberry on the transportation fund. And I think the entire motor vehicle purchase and use tax should go to the transportation fund instead of sending a third of it to education fund. I'm probably saying that, but you all probably agree. And I was reading it, so saying that, it would generate 148.9 million with 99 million going to transportation and 49.6 going to the ed fund. And since there seems to be 166 million of federal transportation money available that you need to find the $33 million match for, to me, it seems like that may be a help with the current funding issue as well as maybe future funding issues. I also think the legislature should adjust the local option tax. It did not pass in Bethel. We've tried and we'll try again for the same reason other towns are doing it, but it didn't pass in Bethel 2 years ago. So, but we'll try again. But I do hope that a higher percentage of that money stays in local communities that have adopted the LOT, and that they should return, any future surplus to municipalities as new appropriations and not as replacement revenue to offset the state's obligations related to reappraisal. So I'm sure that you're all aware of it, but on a day-to-day level, I've been in municipal government for over 20 years, and it's a struggle every day. And we talk to people delinquent, I also been delinquent tax collector, and so we're all trying to stretch a dollar. So anything that you can do to help us, we greatly appreciate. If we need help. Have any questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have Cambridge Road too.
Thank you, representatives and senators, participants of the committee. My name is Kyle Rowe. I'm the town clerk and treasurer of Panton, Vermont. I'm also the representative for Panton to the Transportation Advisory Committee with Addison County Regional Planning. I'm also the town's emergency management coordinator. I'm also the town's representative to a host of other committees. I think that's what that says, Teresa. We wear a lot of hats. Panton, just as some brief information, Panton has approximately 24 miles of road. Our population is about 660 people. We're definitely on the smaller side of Vermont municipalities, of which 15 miles of those 24 miles are paved. Most of them are class 2 and 3. We have 22A, which runs through Panton as our only kind of class 1. And so, we don't have very many class 4 or legal trails. We talked a lot today about costs, and as folks have said, we're preaching to the choir, or if not, it's the converted at least. Panton has a municipal budget of approximately $1 million. Of which, Ted mentioned that 50% of the average municipal budget is for transportation. Ours is actually closer to 70%. But that 70%, offers us opportunities for other kinds of savings or, the offsetting of expenses, which I'll get to in a moment. Cost drivers for Panton, like any other town, the cost of sand, the cost of salt, the cost of gravel, the cost of paving, the cost of plow blades, the cost of equipment, the cost of motor oil, the cost, we do so many repairs in-house, the cost of tires, all the various and sundry things, the incidentals that go into the cost drivers for a small municipal town. But really, one of the biggest cost drivers, and I think that, I would encourage you as just not even members of the transportation committee, but general representatives of Vermont, is to think about the other incidentals that go into the cost drivers for highway budgets. We're talking salaries and benefits. We're talking the cost of insurance. We're talking the things that we could do, of my $600 and approximately $700,000 highway budget in town, almost 10%, a little bit more actually, goes to the cost of health insurance for my employees. I only have two. I have a road foreman and a highway member, and yet we've dropped our health insurance coverage for our people. We offer dental and vision and things like that, but we've dropped those levels of coverages, and we're still talking about cost increases. So I would encourage you as members to think about this as a systemic problem of costs, not necessarily in transportation funded. If 10% of my budget is going to health insurance costs, that's 10% that's not going to the roads. In terms of maintaining that. The cost of, but those are necessary components to keeping highway members and highway crew, kind of engaged in the municipal process. Phoenix Feeds, just down the road from us in New Haven, was offering a job for Class 2 or Class B CDL drivers. They were paying $90,000 a year with benefits to people for a 4-day work week to deliver feed. Now, they're my competition, unfortunately, to attract competent and qualified highway personnel. And we're talking about needing to match private sector salaries and benefits for things like that. It's a very difficult situation for towns. So I would just encourage you to think act locally, think globally, but think about the systemic costs associated with the towns. I'm personally not just here to talk necessarily about the costs, as we've heard quite a bit of that. We can talk about some of the possible solutions. And as Therese mentioned, vehicle costs, Panton is experiencing that right now. We're looking at a new vehicle. We put money aside. We are considering bank loans. But one of the things that the committee, and again, as you as members could be consider, is the expansion of the municipal equipment loan fund to make that larger, more broad, or perhaps just increase the size to allow for vehicle purchases at low interest rates for municipalities, zero interest rates really, for municipalities to then be able to buy that expensive piece of equipment. Another could be the expansion of the grant programs. As Jordan said, the Class 2 is really difficult. We've been the beneficiary last year of the structures grant, which offset the cost of $100,000 in terms of culvert replacement. But the expansion of those projects, or perhaps even smaller targeted grants to allow towns to do culverts that aren't such massive projects, would also be helpful. Better back roads, grant and aid are both helpful in that regard, but still only scratch the surface of those total costs. My particular issue, and I'm speaking here strictly as a person who's been in this job now for just a little over a year and a half, but also as a person who is a taxpayer and engaged in the process, not as a member of the TAP committee in Addison County Regional Planning, is overweight vehicle permitting. I think that's an issue where we've seen the costs associated with towns increase, and the matching revenue and administrative costs and revenue that they receive from the permittees as not increasing. We're also, dealing with the Addison County being an incredibly agricultural community. We're dealing with the fact that there's so many agricultural exemptions. And while we recognize the strength and the economic benefit that those farms provide, not to mention the land use and things like that, we're also talking about some of those vehicles weighing in excess of 150,000 pounds, twice the weight of a fully loaded semi, traveling on town roads, delivering fertilizer, delivering manure, delivering seeds and things like that, and being completely exempt from both the permitting process, or if not exempt from the permitting process, the enforcement of the permitting process, and not being able to be participating members in the shared maintenance of the roads that they rely on to be able to transport goods, services, and inputs to their farm fields. That's a particular issue of mine, is seeing that, we go through vehicle overweight permitting, and we're mid-thrust on that right now, and it's, $5 for a truck, $10 for a fleet of vehicles. And, the town expects maybe between $600 and $800 in revenue from the administrative cost. That does not cover the cost now for my office, which is me and a part-time assistant clerk, to then track down the certificates of insurance and, to make sure that the process is followed and done correctly. So, those are a couple different options that we could look at, the idea of health insurance or insurance in general, the idea of expansion of the MELF, the idea of the expansion of the grant programs, and then perhaps the fine tuning and of the overweight vehicle permitting that we could, maybe either offer different sources of revenue or offer different sources of revenue offsets to these participating communities. One of the other, and like many of my colleagues, I do support the waterfall provision that was in kind of iterations of the bills about the lot surplus. I think that would be incredibly helpful to small towns. Lot revenue is generated by individual communities, but those individual communities' revenue relies on the surrounding communities. For example, Vergennes, the smallest city in Vermont, is surrounded by Panhandle, among other small towns, and the sale meal tax, the sales tax, all the various and sundry lot taxes that they levy are generated by not just the residents of Vergennes, but by the local community. And so the equitable spreading of that lot revenue as transportation additional revenue, not offset revenue, is a really important component, something that I would urge the members to support. One of the other issues is kind of grant management. Like many towns in Vermont, we had damage through July 2024 flooding. We had FEMA, we went through the FEMA grant process. Grant management from the perspective of a small municipal town is a difficult thing to overcome because, again, one person is now doing this. I'm responsible as the emergency management coordinator. I'm chief cook and bottle walker for all aspects of the FEMA reporting and all aspects of the grant reporting for disaster relief. And I have to say that the state has been fantastic in that process, and I really appreciate the Department of Public Safety. I appreciate our friends at VTrans and AOT for helping us in that process. So I have no complaints from the help that we're receiving from the state. But I think that we could see an expansion or an advocacy that those federal dollars are managed by the state. As I can pick up the phone and talk to somebody in AOT or talk to somebody in VTrans, talk to somebody in the Department of Public Safety, whereas I can't necessarily get that same conversation going with a person at the federal government level, particularly when it comes to disaster relief. And so I would encourage an expansion of that area as well. Grant management is a huge source of revenue for us. Last year, we received in Panhandle, of $1 million budget, we received an additional $186,000 in revenue from grants that I wrote. And we're grateful for that, but that's nearly a full-time job in and of itself to do the reporting and the various and sundry, other things for grant revenue. So I think that, we've heard a lot about costs. There's some possible solutions out there. There are possible avenues forward where we're not talking about necessarily an increase in tax and property tax. We're talking about revenue offsets for towns, opportunities for additional or different sources of funding. And I think those are all really important areas of consideration as well for yourselves and just as both transportation committee members and members general.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. My name is Kari Bradley. I'm the town administrator in Cal. I'm also the road commissioner and the treasurer. Seems to be a theme as well.
We got a few jobs.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak about our transportation system from the Calais perspective. Calais is a mid-sized town, just under 1,700 population, and we're only 10 miles north of here, but very rural in our character. We've got 91 miles of road total. 7 of those are state highways, Route 14, and 73 miles are class 2 and 3, which we maintain on a daily basis, almost entirely gravel. We also have over 600 culverts and 5 bridges in various states of repair, disrepair. A little bit about our highway department. We self-perform most of our work, all except for the paving and the largest capital projects. We have 4.5 full-time equivalents. We operate a garage with a full fleet of 4 dump trucks, 2 pickups, 2 graders, and many other pieces of equipment. Our town budget in the next fiscal year will be $2.3 million. Our highway budget is $1.2 million. And that's a 43% increase from 5 years ago. The key drivers, as you've heard, are medical insurance, equipment. I think you heard about 10-wheel dump trucks with plow bodies are going for around $350,000. Graders are close to $400,000. Equipment maintenance is also incredibly expensive, partly because there's so few players. Our crew is driving often 50 miles to get a repair done. We're paying top dollar and hoping that it lasts. Road maintenance materials, sand, gravel, salt, and wages, of course. So I have 2 main points I wanted to share with you today. One is that the state aid that we're receiving currently is critical to what we do. Both in terms of our just normal operations, the annual state aid payments are about 15% of our highway budget, and that allows us to maintain and keep up with this severe cost inflation that we've been seeing. But also in terms of the special projects, we try to access as many grants as we have the capacity for the structures class 2 highway. Those are very important for us to do the extra things that protect the safety of the roads, improve water quality, and hardening for the next flood. And so we really view the state as a critical partner in that, and that we're each doing our part in providing safe and reliable roads for the people that use them, and also helping out the folks that are downstream from us. Another thing I want to emphasize is that our town is doing many things right. We have a really talented and dedicated crew. We have an excellent relationship with our employees union. We have a forward-thinking select board, a solid capital planning process. We work with our RPC. Our taxpayers support us in investment, and still it's not enough. Just in terms of the key infrastructure projects that we have on our plate right now, we have one bridge that we hope to, if we get a structures grant this year, just do some temporary repairs to shore up the abutments. We have a paving project that needs to happen if we get a class 2 highway grant, and a section of it is down to the roadbed and will have to be reclaimed. We have 4 key culverts that need to be upgraded. 2 of them failed in the 23 and 24 floods, and 2 others are in major pinch points in town. The hydraulic studies and engineering work that we've had on these culverts require much larger structures that range from $250,000 to $1 million for these projects. And then the biggest project in town is a bridge in the heart of East Cowles Village on one of the busiest roads in town that's way beyond its useful life, and is only about half the span that it needs to be based on what should be the bankable width of that stream. It's a $2.1 million project in today's dollars. It doesn't seem to be eligible for any federal grants, at least at this time, and we're not sure how we're going to deal with it. So just giving you a sense of what we're dealing with and doing our best with it. The other thing I want to emphasize at just that big picture level is the value of the transportation system to our towns and residents. And it's nothing that you don't already know and that all Vermonters don't know. But in 2 years in this role, I have a new appreciation for just what a fundamental importance our roads are to our rural way of life. The floods of 23 and 24 reinforced that importance, and they also revealed the vulnerability of our system. And I really feel that the safe and reliable road system is a key condition for Vermonters to be able to live here and fund our state and local government. And I really believe it's part of our identity as central to our identity. And not to mention that it's a key ingredient in terms of attracting newcomers and local development. So really urge you to consider all the different ways that we can enhance the transportation budget.
It's the fire alarm, so we Megan, you're our first. Sorry now.
Right, thank you.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
Already testimony.
All right.